In the final years of the 19th century, when westward expansion was redefining borders and migratory flows, itinerant photographers captured scenes of bohemian life in brothels. By posing in ornate rooms, sex workers revealed routines, consumption, and internal hierarchies, preserving traces of local gender and economics. 1870s, Death Valley, California. With the boom in borax used in soaps and glass, 20 mule teams emerged to cover 260 kilometers to the nearest railroad. In the arid Great Basin setting, each trip carried 36 tons of the mineral, connecting isolated mines to the industrial centers of the Pacific. Black Elk on the left portrays himself as a young warrior and future spiritual leader of the Oglala Lakota, participant in the Indigenous victory at Little Bighorn in 1876. Decades later, he would witness the Wounded Knee Massacre, a tragic milestone marking the end of the Indian Wars on the Great Plains. Quanah Parker, Comanche chief born c. 1845, led his people in the Plains Wars. Son of Cynthia Ann Parker and warrior Peta Nocona, he became a central voice against buffalo hunters who weakened his culture. After surrendering in 1875 at Fort Sill, he guided the transition to reservations and advocated for tribal rights. In the late 19th century, at the height of the Northern Pacific's railroad expansion, two courtesans posed elegantly in a luxurious salon of a brothel in Miles City, Montana. The town, then home to 1,000 residents, was considered by a judge to be a den of vice and violence, a reflection of the frontier's sudden boom. In the 1880s in Caldwell, Kansas, a vital point on the Chisholm Trail, a cowboy posed with chaps that protected his legs from the elements and thorny vegetation during long drives leading herds to the trains supplying eastern markets. Last known image of George Armstrong Custer, nicknamed Boy General, famed Union cavalry officer in the Civil War, and later commander of the 7th Regiment in the conquest of the Great Plains. The photograph from April 1876, when he was 36 years old, was taken 2 months before his death at the Battle of Little Bighorn against Lakota and Cheyenne forces. At the turn of the 1850s, after Frederick S. Archer's invention of the wet collodion process, 1851, the ambrotype spread across the United States, requiring less exposure time and costing less than the daguerreotype. Itinerant photographers set up tents along stagecoach routes, charcoal camps, and mining fields. The subject's identity is unknown. The image reflects a frontier society in flux. Greenwood County, Kansas, late 19th century. Pioneers paused their march across the Great Plains and, in the shade of a Conestoga wagon, shared simple meals. Since the Homestead Act of 1862, trails such as the Santa Fe and the rail network had attracted families seeking free plots, turning prairies into agricultural communities. At the turn of the 20th century, when the rodeo was solidifying as a popular spectacle of the American West, Joella Irwin stood out by competing in roping and riding events alongside men. Her skill demonstrated that women could compete on equal footing, paving the way for future generations and changing the rural sports landscape. Taken in 1884 on a cabinet card at the San Carlos Reservation, Arizona, the scene depicts Geronimo, the Apache leader whose campaigns against the U.S. Army defined the Apache Wars. 2 years before his surrender, the photo illustrates how mobile studios in the West documented Native peoples for distant audiences. Jesse Woodson James emerged in Missouri devastated by the Civil War, fighting as a Confederate guerrilla before leading, with his brother Frank, the James Younger Gang. From 1866 to 1881, he robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches, defying Pinkerton agents and symbolizing the chaos of Reconstruction. He was killed on April 3, 1882 by Robert Ford, a former associate. At the height of the United States westward march in the mid-19th century, Christopher Kit Carson distinguished himself as a trapper, explorer, and skilled mountain man. Between 1842 and 1844, He guided John C. Fremont's scientific expeditions, which mapped essential routes to the Pacific, cementing his notoriety in frontier history. A C-1880 photograph remains shrouded in mystery regarding the identities of those present. Studies suggest that the standing man is John Kinney, a notorious outlaw who, 5 years earlier, led a gang of raiders in southern New Mexico territory, a region marked by land disputes, conflict between ranchers, and unstable post-war order. In 1899, when the American frontier was already closing and the stagecoach era was giving way to the train, Pearl Hart shocked Arizona by robbing a payroll coach near Globe. Arrested, she gained notoriety in a country fascinated by outlaws and, upon being featured in Cosmopolitan, became a late symbol of the Old West myth. Her daring also challenged the gender roles of the time. In 1895, in the newly organized Oklahoma Territory, the clash between federal marshals and Bill Doolin's gang symbolized the twilight of the Old West. In that skirmish at Ingalls, the young Rose Dunn, then 15 years old, crossed the town square under heavy fire to bring ammunition and aid her outlaw boyfriend, an action that earned her the nickname Cimarron Rose. In 1885, Texas John Slaughter posed, already celebrated for his patrols during the Civil War and for the success of the cattle drives crossing the Chisholm Trail. The lens captured him at the height of Texas's transition to Arizona territory, when he founded the San Bernardino Ranch, reflecting the cattle industry's expansion and the consolidation of the southwest frontier in a setting of railroad growth and tensions with native peoples. In 1850s Arizona, Olive Oatman, a young pioneer headed for California, was captured during her family's migration. Traded to the Mojave by the Yavapai, she lived in the village on the banks of the Colorado River for nearly 4 years. The blue tattoo on her chin, made with cactus pigment, marked a form of protection for the passage to the spiritual world according to Mojave cosmology. Unofficially founded by Stephen F. Austin in 1823 and formalized in 1835, the Texas Rangers acted as a volunteer armed force, patrolling borders, capturing outlaws, and serving as scouts in the Mexican-American War, supporting the Texas Revolution and the subsequent Republic, and shaping state security. In an antique shop in Missouri, Mark Lee Gardner discovered a previously unknown photograph revealing an unusual scene of the American West. In it, a woman, possibly a rural landowner, stands before her home in the late 19th century, a time of agricultural expansion and the consolidation of frontiers. Tiburcio Vasquez, a Californian born in 1835, operated as an outlaw between 1854 and 1874, a period when California transitioned from Mexican to American sovereignty. The 1865 image shows him already famous for leading gangs, robbing stagecoaches and evading posses, a figure seen by some as resistance and by others as a threat. Between 1870 and 1890, cowboys drove massive herds from Texas to the railheads of Kansas, a vital stage of the U.S. cattle economy. Upon reaching towns, they sought photographic studios, donning hats, bandanas, and holsters, capturing in the image their own labor conditions and the frontier ideal that shaped the West's expansion. Bill Doolin, born in 1858 in Arkansas, led the Wild Bunch Gang, which robbed trains and banks in the Oklahoma Territory between 1892 and 1896, a period of rapid settlement and little law enforcement. Hunted by federal sheriffs, he carried a high bounty. On August 5, 1896, in Lawson, Heck Thomas surprised him and fired around 20 shots, marking the end of the Old West. On October 30, 1881, 4 days after the gunfight at the OK Corral, the streets of Tombstone witnessed the funeral procession for Tom and Frank McLaury and Billy Clanton. On the coffins was written, "Murdered on the streets of Tombstone." The slogan denounced the tension between the Earps and the Cowboys and turned the funeral into a public act of mourning and protest. During the Alaska Gold Rush, 1896–1905. Crowded mining camps sought fortune and entertainment. Kate Rockwell, known as Klondike Kate, enlivened the saloons of Skagway and Dawson with dances and popular songs. In red chiffon dresses, she transformed rustic spaces into vibrant stages, winning the admiration of prospectors. In 1865, shortly after the end of the Civil War, James Butler Wild Bill Hickok posed in everyday attire. The image captures a veteran who had served as a Union scout and was already famed for duels in Springfield. In that period, frontier towns attracted migrants and conflict, and figures like Hickok personified the transition from military outposts to urban centers in the West. By 1876, Dodge City had become a crucial hub for the cattle trails driving the Southwest economy. In that context, Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp, then officers of Ford County, posed shoulder to shoulder. The scene reveals the pact between lawmen seeking to impose order in a settlement marked by gambling, alcohol, and gunfighters.